Good afternoon. My name is Jim Conlan, and welcome to the latest episode of our entertainment show. As you know, in part three of our entertainment show each week, we run a special feature called Into the Vaults, where we look back at iconic movies and TV series throughout the decade that have left their mark in the entertainment industry, whether it be a 60s Western, maybe it's a 70s police detective show, maybe it's an 80s horror movie, maybe it's a 90s futuristic sort of thriller, maybe it's a 2000 rom-com, or maybe it's a 21st century sci-fi phenomenon. This week we're going back to 2009. We're going back to one of the major movies to come out of South Africa, and in that sort of year, and a real sort of, dare I say, a true home country sort of cast. It was the vision of Neil Blomkamp, the director who lived in Johannesburg throughout his entire life. It was called District 9. It featured a cast including Jason Cope, Sylvester Strike, Natalia Bolt, Peter Jackson, and our special guest, the one and only this evening, Sharlto Copley, who played the lead role of Vickius van der Mede. Charles, I was doing my research for this interview and this movie in District 9, and they say sometimes when friends have a great idea and close friends have a great camaraderie, that special things can happen, and that sort of happened for you and your relationship with Neil Blomkamp. It was his sort of vision that he sort of had, and you had that sort of, dare I say, friendship with him before the movie came into sort of creation, and it really put you on the map, and dare I say, it put him on the map as well.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, and that's really true, Jim. It's interesting because Neil Blomkamp, the director and creator of District 9, he and I became friends through work. So we weren't actually friends who then were working together. We really became friends through work, through a mutual kind of love of film, and through kind of sharing what we were doing in our respective fields. Neil was working in 3D animation. I was one of the founders of a TV channel. Before I met him, we were actually working on the TV channel, but we would shoot shorts and various things in live action. At the time, I was busy doing that. Neil was working in animation. And so our friendship, came from kind of a love of the entertainment business, of film specifically, and kind of developed. And yes, it was a truly miraculous situation for me and for him, I think, ultimately. But for me to land up acting in that movie, when I think back now with everything that I've sort of learned about Hollywood and sort of knowing how deals are structured, etc., it's just absolutely unbelievable that we were able to cast, that Neil was able to cast me in the movie. I was not an actor. I was not trying to be an actor. I was meant to produce the film for Neil, and with Peter Jackson being the main sort of name producer and me being more of a hands-on producer on the ground. So the fact that I ended up starring in the movie and making up all the dialogue, it's just unheard of. I think there was about $65 million on the line. There was $35 million for marketing and about 30 for the budget, if I recall, before we even started filming. And the only reason that could happen was Peter Jackson had in his deal the right to basically have final say over everything. And he had this kind of ridiculous level of vision where it was like, okay, go for it. I mean, you just don't hear of things like that happening in Hollywood. You just don't. I mean, it's crazy things like that probably happened in the pioneers of Hollywood who basically invented the place. But that kind of leadership that Pete showed in that situation is just very, very rare.
And when you heard about it, that they wanted you to be an actor in the movie, were you first, well, obviously the money that's involved, the production that's involved, the sort of the craft, the year, everything that goes into the movie, were you thinking to yourself, well, has he probably lost the plot here for a minute? This is something that I haven't done before. What was the Okay, what was the initial sort of reaction? Was it one of shock or disbelief? What made you think that he came up with this idea that I want my producer friends to go and be the Harrison Ford, dare I say, of this movie?
It was strange because it didn't come completely out of the blue, in that I had made, when Neil was working on the idea with his wife, Terry Tatchell, who wrote the story with him, he wanted to show Pete what an Afrikaans bureaucrat was like in South Africa, kind of in the apartheid era. Pete didn't have any frame of reference. And so Neil said to me, well, I'm coming out for a friend's wedding. Why don't we go and shoot some stuff in the township? And you just do like an Afrikaans character, like just invent something, and I'll edit it together to show Pete. And so we had made basically, I think it was about a 10-minute short, which was, at that time, the character didn't have a name, but I did essentially what you see in District 9 Vickers in the beginning of the movie, when he's evicting aliens from shacks. We went around to local residents and we were working with the community in a very impoverished neighborhood. And we basically said, look, pretend that I'm evicting you for, foreigners, for Nigerians or people from Sierra Leone or Kenya or whatever, and they're going to come and live in your shack, and I'm from the government, and just give me a hard time. And so we just had a lot of fun with those scenes, and got these unbelievably real performances from the people in the townships, and made a very fun little piece, which Peter and Fran, his wife or his partner, saw and really enjoyed, and Neil really enjoyed. And I think Neil said to me subsequently from that he, at that time, he thought, now I really would like to do the whole film in this loose improv style instead of giving the actors dialogue. But he didn't think at all that he would be able to cast me. But I was kind of the reference now in his head and in Terry's head, and as they were writing. And then I shot one more short where they wanted to test more stuff, playing the same guy. At that time was the first time Neil said, well, this is kind of the main guy in the movie. But it was always kind of like, well, you should do a cameo in it, Charles. You should do a cameo. And I was like, yeah, I should. That would be fun. And so, yeah, when he told me, how about instead of producing, do you want to just be the guy? It was stunning, but strangely felt completely normal. Like it was like, yes, I can be this guy. It was one of those moments where everything in your life kind of comes to this point. It's like all the things I'd done in the past, the life that we both lived in South Africa, the experiences with racial challenges and clashes and characters. You could just suddenly just put yourself into everything. I'd written a movie, so I had writing experience as well, which I think was useful in the improv. So it was, I wasn't nervous, which was weird. I was just like, yes, let's do this. I was excited.
And Sharlto, in terms of that, obviously the reaction, it went global, it went all over the world, District sort of 9, and all of a sudden now you're seeing this sort of attention. You're being recognized as an actor, being recognized for an Academy Award for that sort of role and portrayal. Was it almost like a sort of an opening, an awakening of a sort of a new career? Did you think yourself, right, initially when you took on the project, did you think to yourself, right, we're doing a budget film, this is one project, I'll go back to what I'm doing afterwards in terms of production and what I'm crafted? Or when this went global, what was the initial sort of reaction? Did you think to yourself, right, this bring me on a new sort of chapter, let's go for it?
Well, it's interesting because it was a very special time making the movie. I always had great faith in Neil. I always thought, from when I met him, I thought he'd be one of the top directors in the world. And so as we were making it, I had enormous faith in him. It was completely different, but I always felt that Neil was, we had Peter Jackson. So I felt like this could be a pretty big deal. Like that was pretty clear. With Pete and Neil involved, it was like, this can be pretty special. we got to the end. Neil played a trick on me, actually, and said at one point when he had finished editing the movie, he said, Charl, we've screened it for Sony because Sony were going to come. They were flying to New Zealand to watch it. I hadn't seen the movie. I was in South Africa. And he said, he left me a message and he said, they're not going to screen it theatrically. It's going to go straight to DVD. But, you did a great job. And because of the time difference, he left the message where he had then gone to sleep. So I basically sat for like 24 hours believing that our film was basically going to go straight to DVD. And it was weird. I was disappointed. I was but at the same time, I left him a message and I said, dude, I'm still so proud of this movie. I had such an incredible time making it. I think it's a really special project. And then he just sort of laughed and went, ha ha, no, they love it. Sony love it. But it was weird because I was kind of prepared for it not to go anywhere, really, psychologically. And then, as soon as we screened it at Comic-Con. And we realized afterwards with the audience reaction, like, oh, wow, okay, this is a pretty big deal now. And I guess I'd had a feeling even before that it was going to change my life. And it really did, it really changed. It was just one of those blessings, sort of grace almost coming into your life. And it's something so much bigger than what you can actually do yourself or what I could do myself. That it was pretty surreal, obviously, and it was a real benefit and bonus for me that people in Hollywood specifically liked the movie as well. So it did well, box office and everything else, but it had a certain kind of creative respect in the Hollywood community that I still, my career still goes based on that film in a lot of ways.
And I suppose the authenticity of it, the originality of it, there was no real American actors in it, as far as I'm aware of. It was all a South African-based concept. It was sort of true to the roots. There was as you mentioned there, you actually went out to some of these ghettos, some of these areas in Johannesburg and actually filmed. Obviously the people there vacated their place, but you actually filmed. So some of the sets were actually real sort of places. They were really what you see in terms of that. So you almost tried to bring, even though it was a sci-fi, even though it was science fiction and it was fiction, you tried to almost bring the reality of the home place of Johannesburg to the movie as well.
Absolutely. There was a huge degree of authenticity in the film. As much as it was sci-fi, we created a very authentic, we shot in, as you say, we shot most of the time, we were shooting in real townships. We managed to buy some shacks from people, put them in better government housing, so we sort of were able to do a little bit of upliftment in one of the communities there. But I was crawling around in real dirt. I mean, I'd be finished at the end of the day and there'd be, I'd have this alien claw on and there'd be like human feces in the claw. And it was, just stuff that you couldn't put sort of normal professional actors in now. Like, there's no way, people would just say, like, there's no way I'm going to do this. I'm not going to go. Whenever you see me in the movie going through trash heaps or doing stuff, it was all real. It was just like, that'd be a real trash heap. We'd put a little sandwich there and say, like, okay, scrounge through trash and then eat the sandwich. I still remember a scene where I have to do that and I'm starving and I'm looking for food. So we just put it on a little paper plate. We put this like old sandwich, in amongst all this real trash. So I go, as they say, action, I'm scrounging through and I'm grabbing, I'm looking through real garbage and I'm like, is there anything in here? Like, no, pretending I would eat it if I found something. Then I see my sandwich and I grab the sandwich and I'm eating away. I'm like, and as I'm eating on camera, I realize my hands are filthy because I've just been using my hands to scrounge through a real trash heap, but now I'm holding a sandwich. And I remember that moment of like, do I bite the crust where my hands were touching, or do I just go like, okay, guys, cut. I can't eat this part of the sandwich. My hands are filthy. And back then, now I definitely would not do this, but back then I was like, fuck it. And I just ate the whole sandwich. It was crazy. It was really nuts.
And I suppose, Sharlto, in terms of that, in terms of the originality, we know in Hollywood most of those scenes now would be green screened in terms of what you would sort of see in terms of that. But you wanted the originality in terms of that. Obviously, the infrastructure, you were out block shooting, you were out on location sort of shooting as well, and that because it was your own project and it was sorts of so dear to you, did you spend that extra time? Did you go over that a lot of time in terms of what normally movies sort of maybe 6 to 8 weeks sort of shoots? Did you go over that? Did you spend a bit of longer, a bit of extra time just to hone every sort of thing to put the finesse touches there, I said?
Absolutely. We put in so much time. In the end, we shot 75 days. We'd shot, I think, 60 something, and then we went back again for pickups, thanks to Peter as well supporting us to do that. We were like, certain things that Neil wanted to get for the movie. So we went back again. During those 2 weeks, I've never worked so hard in my life. I mean, there were nights where, I would have like a 5 or 6 hour turnaround, as they call it, like from when you say, okay, go home to when you're back on set the next day. Which you would, again, like I wasn't a SAG actor with unions or anything like that that would insist on overtime payments, etc. So I didn't do any of that. I wasn't like being paid overtime or in the way that I would be now. It was just all hands on deck. We just put our hearts and souls into everything, and yeah, it was definitely incredibly grueling film to make. Like, that's for sure for me. It was very demanding. We shot a lot of stuff that's not in the movie because there was so much improv. There were like 4 different endings to the film at one point, and just huge amounts of fun improv stuff. But that took a lot of energy, and even some action stuff, some fights, some certain things that are not in.
Okay. And Sharlto Copley, I was speaking to you before we came on air, and you mentioned that you have a few other projects that are in the pipeline, and even a Hollywood blockbuster that was filmed in Saudi Arabia that might be coming our way soon, if you might indulge us a tiny bit to get the juices going.
Yeah, it was fun, man. I did this movie called Desert Warrior. It was myself and Anthony Mackie and Aisha Hart from the UK, a British Saudi actress, and Ben Kingsley, and we were shooting literally in the desert, in the middle of nowhere. The Saudi desert is spectacular. The crew, they flew in 550 people, and then they bussed in another 250 from like Jordan and Dubai, surrounding countries. It was a massive scale project to sort of undertake in a country that has no film infrastructure really. The Saudis are kind of wanting to do a big push into the film industry, and so yeah, it was a desert war epic. I mean, it was set in 609 AD, before the rise of Islam, about a princess that kind of unites Arab tribes in the region, and it was a spectacular experience to be a part of, and one of the last films that they will make. You were talking earlier about the green screen. So much now on film is just being done, digitally. That to actually get to go out and ride horses on the desert and fight in the sand was a very special experience.
And Sharlto Copley, I do believe you've been here to Ireland once or twice in the past.
Yeah. My wife's family is from Ireland, so we a couple of years back we took a trip, and went all over the countryside, went to visit the family, made a whole Irish playlist of like classic Irish music. I really got into that whole thing, I must go look at what some of my tracks are called on there, but there's some great, I love some of the traditional Irish music. It's just fantastic. It just gets you dancing and gets you going. We were always filming in the car, and I enjoy the people a lot. I really enjoyed the people, sort of, I don't know, for me it was like a lot of heart and soul kind of that I could feel in the place. And I remember driving through, I can't remember where the area was, but it was on one of the days, you know, with celebrating. I can't remember where it was, but it basically just brought into focus a little bit of the history of, you know, the divisions in Ireland, and I just had this real hope for the country that all gets healed. You know, coming from a country like South Africa that had incredible trauma and difficulties, any country that's kind of experienced real difficulty and conflict in its past, somehow I sort of resonate with that and resonate with the idea of healing and trying to go forward. I guess that was my experience growing up in South Africa at the end of apartheid, you know, with great leaders. And yeah, it seemed a very, very special place, Ireland, you know.
And Sharlto Copley, now for the final 30 seconds, you might enlighten our audience, all our listeners, a whole new generation of sci-fi fans that, dare I say, weren't even born in 2009, that might be looking for a movie, that might be looking for something to whet the appetite. And if they stumble across District 9, Sharlto Copley, what's in store for them that they should sit down and watch it in their TV screens?
I mean, I think it's a very intense film. There's a lot of heart and humanity and intense emotion in it, which sci-fi films often struggle to get. A lot of sci-fi is really great visually. And I think what you have in District 9, which is very different from now, you know, it was definitely, as I was telling you, you know, the story of how it was created, in a sense, it was true artists making the film. And I don't say that lightly. Like, the state of our art right now is a little bit dubious in my view, you know, with the fact that it's been huge companies are making these films. They made a lot of the time by committee. A lot of, you know, algorithms are influencing creative TV shows and movies now. This is just something that's deeply original, deeply authentic, and commercial. It's commercial art, which doesn't come along too often. You know, it's not manufactured franchise stuff. It's just a piece of work that can compete with a franchise, but really is an artwork at the same time.
On that note, time has caught up with us there today. Sharlto Copley, for me, Jim Conlan, stay safe. Take care. Thanks for joining us for this week's Into the Vault episode, where we look back in 2009, the sci-fi classic District 9, which platformed Sharlto Copley on his way to Hollywood glory, and obviously at the moment Saudi Arabian glory by all accounts. But for me, Jim Conlan, to you, Sharlto Copley, stay safe, take care, God bless.
Thank you, Jim. Thanks for having me on.
Cheers.